only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA and Vice Chair of the Urbanism Division. Today, Friday, July 24th, we will hear the presentation, How Can Landscape Architects Aid the Transportation Planning Process? For technical help during today's webcast, type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or call the 1-800 number shown in bold. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the questions box, also located to the right of your screen, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. If your question is for a particular panelist, please indicate so. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions. Thanks to all of the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Transportation Planning Division. To learn more about all of the divisions, visit planning.org/divisions, and to learn about the chapters, planning.org/chapters. On your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. To register for these webcasts, visit ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, visit ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. This webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. Some recorded webcasts are available for distance education CM credit, and for availability of distance education credits, check the webcast webpage at ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. And we are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. And a PDF of the presentation will be available after the end of the session at ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. Okay, I will now turn it over to Brian Laverty to introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Christine. As Christine said, I'm Brian Laverty with Sabra Wang and Associates in Falls Church, Virginia. Our webinar today examines the linkages between landscape architecture and transportation planning, looking at how addressing design issues as early as possible in the planning process can result in transportation solutions more likely to win public support and produce the best transportation outcomes. Our first presenter is John Dempsey from Toole Design Group in Boston, Massachusetts, who's going to speak on the linkages between landscape architecture and transportation planning. John is a licensed landscape architect who specializes in site design and planning, streetscape improvements, and non-motorized transportation projects. He has direct experience working on a wide range of on-street and off-street bicycle facilities, bicycle parking design, collaborative charrette-style workshops, feasibility studies, landscape design, and safe routes to school projects. And so without any further ado, I'll pass things over to John.
John, just so you know, in case you're speaking, you are muted.
Sorry, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to kick off the panel discussion with a brief introduction of what is landscape architecture. The slide on the screen is a first concept plan of Central Park, and this was kind of a direct result of the nearly quadruple population of New York City, roughly during the 1820s to 1850s. In 1853, New York State passed legislature to purchase roughly the land from 59th Street to 106th Street, which is on the screen. Then the Central Park Commission was developed to oversee kind of a landscape design contest. Frederick Law Olmsted developed this plan, which is called the Greensward Plan, and was selected kind of as the winning design. And this design was kind of just create more open space to the noisy and kind of chaotic city life that was developing in Manhattan. Here is an interior shot of the park, and you see we have a nice promenade, beautiful mature canopy of trees, bench seating, and patrons kind of describing or enjoying the scenery away from the urban, chaotic, and congestion of the city. So let's fast forward a little to kind of today, what is landscape architecture? And I'll just read the text on the screen. Landscape architecture is the design of space to achieve environmental, social, behavioral, and aesthetic balance. And you're probably like, John, what does that fancy design jargon really mean? So sometimes I like to tell a personal story of how I actually got into landscape architecture. As it happens, my dad is a now retired New York State forester, and my mother is a contemporary design painter. So I really see kind of using both of their professions and combining it to landscape architecture, which really kind of combines art and science. It is the profession that really designs, plans, and manages our land. Some common misconceptions. Sometimes people think landscape architects are gardeners or landscapers. Landscape design is just for decoration, which I'll hope to prove not correct. It's only a summer job. And sometimes I've been called tree hugger, which I actually don't take offense to because I love everything about trees. And interesting note about the image on the slide now, it's actually the most viewed landscape in the world. And I'm sure if you turned on any kind of computer in the last day or two, you've seen this image. And believe it or not, it is an actual natural landscape photographed in California, and evidently was not photoshopped or manipulated whatsoever. So moving along into kind of specific skill sets of landscape architects, I think we really have a sensitivity to kind of context-sensitive design. So meaning just really kind of engaging the landscape and understanding what is happening. I think we take kind of more of an artistic approach in design, so that balance of science and nature. And then I'm going to skip to the one all the way at the bottom because I think this is really kind of paramount in my mind. I think from my experience, landscape architects always keep the design process in mind. So that means from an initial, loose concept sketch on trace paper to actually implementing it into the ground with construction documents. And then I also like to evolve from that. So what did you do wrong? How can you improve on this design? Any way to kind of benefit the public. So on the left here, this is the Landscape Architecture Bible, Time Saver Standards. It's a very hefty book, provides all sorts of great resources. And on the right-hand side, I just listed some kind of specialty disciplines that kind of speak to any kind of specialized area that you may see landscape architects performing their talents. I know you probably think there is a lot of overlap in between all of these private or all these separate disciplines. So let's get to the transportation planning aspect, and I think everyone kind of understands what this means. Deals with the evaluation, assessment, design and siting of sidewalk, bicycle, roadway infrastructure, as well as public transit facilities. So how this overlaps, I think, with landscape architecture. We have a professional group society. It's called the American Society of Landscape Architects. The overall vision of this profession is to lead the design and stewardship of land and communities. I'd like to also point out that the ASLA also has a transportation group, and it's an advocacy group. And you can see the partners on the right are directly intertwined with ASLA as well. Okay, so landscape architecture and transportation. I'm going to cover kind of three kind of distinct areas that I see specific kind of overlap. We have transportation infrastructure, and this accounts for roughly 20 to 40% of urban land in our cities. There are also approximately 1,900 miles, that's a typo, of abandoned railway in the U.S. And also we have countless underpasses and waterways roaming through our cities. And I thought this was a really kind of defining statement. Streets define the character of neighborhoods and are the common ground where people travel, meet, and do business on a daily basis. So I think a lot of people are familiar with complete streets. Landscape architects are immediately involved with this kind of growing momentum. And as you guys know, complete streets policies just promote the creation of more walkable and public transportation-oriented communities. And it's just really thereby improving pedestrian safety, encouraging healthy, active lifestyles, improving air quality, and just the overall community resiliency. Complete streets, like I was saying, are designed for all ages, whether they walk, bike, ride, or drive. I think they're integral to the connectivity of traffic, whatever that may be, and just, I think, more pedestrianized spaces, I think, from an approach or design standpoint. I think downtown streets then can become destinations worth visiting, not just roadways to get to a workplace or for leisure. Neighborhood streets can then become places where parents would feel safe to let their children play. Commercial areas can be designed to reflect grand boulevards, safe for all modes of transportation. So this is a really basic kind of complete streets effort. On the left, you'll see a kind of 4-lane typical roadway cross-section. On the right is an attempt to more modernize it and complete the street. We have reduced the number of travel lanes to 3 and providing a center turn lane, and then also allocated space for bicycle accommodations in both directions. This is another example from a recent project I worked on in Mobile, Alabama. We conducted a non-motorized workshop of the downtown area, and this particular street corridor, again, fairly large cross-section. You can see 3 lanes in each direction and a left turn lane pocket. So working with the traffic engineers and local planners and designers, we are able to come up with this kind of cross-section, which includes a 3-lane, with 1 lane each direction, and a center turn lane, and reallocate the space on the left side of the road as more of a linear park with a shared use path, excellent walking facilities. This is that same roadway, and you can see how massive of a cross-section it is. It really kind of bisects each neighborhood on either side. And you would think you'd see some type of automobile traffic at any time during the day in a 7-lane cross-section. As you can see, we have none. This is our kind of photomorph rendering. You can see, again, it's going down to 3-lane cross-section. On the left-hand side of the screen, it's provided a linear park with nice, mature shade trees, seating for kind of enjoying the space. And I think this is going to be a big catalyst to connect each neighborhood on either side of the road, shortens the crossing, makes it more of a destination and a place. Other ways you can kind of complete the street. This is a kind of a new term. It's called tactical urbanism. And these are relatively low-cost, temporary changes to the built environment. So you can see on the photo on the left, the temporary bike lanes are done in white duct tape. You have kind of temporary planters to provide vegetation to soften each side of the road. You also have movable furniture to kind of create a temporary pop-up park. And again, these are low cost and just kind of showing what is capable to be done in the public right-of-way. Another quick example of tactical urbanism, again, you have hay bale for a table, planters that kind of soften the edge, and movable furniture as well. Here's another example from a project I worked on in Somerville, Massachusetts, and this was, again, a neighborhood kind of planning workshop. And we found this to actually be a great conversation starter. We had an open house style workshop for 3 days, and people would kind of linger in front of our working studio space and kind of, mill around on this, and kind of, it really was a catalyst to kind of start the discussion and bring them into our space and have them ask questions, find out what we were doing and why. Parklets are another kind of great, you can be either temporary or permanent. These 2 examples on the screen are more of a temporary implementation. And like similar to tactical urbanism, parklets can provide kind of a side extension of the existing sidewalk, provide space for pedestrians, allow for vegetation, and also provide for bike parking. So if a particular parklet becomes a temporary bike or a parklet becomes successful, a lot of communities are developing partnerships with local businesses, and this one is more of a permanent picture. You can see the curb is flush with the sidewalk, making it ADA accessible. They have more permanent planters, vegetation, as well as more kind of permanent street furniture as well. The next topic I want to hit on is the approximately 19,000 miles of abandoned railway in the U.S. And this is a direct result through the design and construction of miles of highway infrastructure. This just left miles and miles of railway abandoned or just taken out of use. Designers and planners have collaborated to repurpose existing railroad lines to connect people with community paths. And the old railroad infrastructure was thus removed, and the hardscape was kind of put in its place. This may or may have not been the first Rails to Trails project. Obviously, I'm kidding, but as an avid cyclist, I kind of find it interesting to give that a try, as long as the railroad corridor was non-used anymore. So like I was saying, so across the U.S., approximately 19,000 miles of abandoned railways have been transformed, and this is a direct result of the Rails to Trails Conservancy program, and this has put a total of approximately 1,600 walking and bicycling paths through the U.S. Since their inception in the mid-1980s, it really helped to create a powerful national movement that starts to connect communities from coast to coast. So you can see here where they just kind of in the slide on the left, repurpose and put hardscape down. The slide on the right, or the image on the right, made the bridge pedestrian and bicycle only. Additional amenities included in these shared use paths could be old depots, so maybe repurposing them as a visitor's booth, Also creating kiosks and different kind of seating amenities that may be included. And a big kind of movement within our firm, we're trying to, they're not just trails to get you from place to place. They really are becoming places themselves. So we like to coin the phrase path and place to kind of link these communities, and it's all about the journey through the space. One of the I guess most prolific examples of this in recent time is the High Line in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. Again, this was an defunct elevated railway, and a movement started in Chelsea, and they developed this spectacular linear park, repurposing some of railroad infrastructure, creating interesting bench seating, and spectacular use of plant materials, and the views and vistas are breathtaking. The last kind of topic I'm going to touch on are the countless underpasses and waterways that kind of have been implemented throughout our U.S. cities. Underpasses, they get a bad name. This is an example of potentially doing some low-cost lighting improvements and adds a certain level of drama and safety for the user, where if it was previously unlit, may be skeptical to kind of connect on either side. I think this is a fairly low-cost solution. And again, overpasses and underpasses allow for the uninterrupted flow of bike and ped movement. And it also allows the extra separation from traffic. And you can see here it's actually coming underneath the path and then actually connecting at grade to the road. So a really, really important kind of connection. This is a project in DC. It is Garfield Park, basically a canal park in southeast DC. And it started out as a kind of improvement to bicycle and pedestrian accommodations connections, and it turned into this conceptual kind of rendering of really identifying a place and space for the neighborhood. So not just moving through the underpass, but you could actually potentially program it to allow users to extend their stay and make more of a amenity for the community and neighborhood. And lastly, waterways. So as cities began to develop, older cities relied heavily on waterways and canals to move goods. This is an image roughly in Copenhagen in the 1960s, and it's New Haven. It was a gateway into the city, and it used to handle, heavy cargo and fishermen. However, the lifestyle around it became notorious for illicit behavior and crime, and it just started to drag down the local community. Flashing forward today, it's an extremely useful public space, and older water infrastructure has the opportunity for creating outdoor spaces just like this. I particularly really like the detail of the wooden board at the edge of the canal. It really puts the users closer to the water and just more of a intimate kind of vibe and location. Here's a more modern and new design. This is in Seattle. Again, attention to detail. You have the separated facilities, bikes on the bike path, pedestrians kind of closer to the water at this particular section. Interesting use of plant materials and grade onto the lower right-hand side, and then also interesting use of pavement materials on either side of the pathway. So transportation for all, I think, is really an exciting movement happening now. Investing in old transportation infrastructure can really be a catalyst to help rebuild communities. I think we are living in a super exciting time. A lot of the studies show people are moving back into the cities and looking for just really high quality spaces along with multimodal transportation options. And I think landscape architects are poised. We're poised to meet the need by making wise use of our environmental resources. And I think the work today is not going to go away. It's in demand today, and it will be in the future. I think landscape architects are working with planners and engineers across the U.S. to help shape communities for active living. And if you guys are on the Twitter, you can follow us at Toole Design Group. And that is my presentation. I will pass it over to Brian to introduce Stephen and then give control to Stephen as well.
Thanks, John. Our second speaker is Stephen Luoni, who is the Director and Principal Designer at the University of Arkansas Community Design Center, and he's going to introduce us to the Little Rock Creative Corridor project, which the Community Design Center executed. Under Stephen's direction since 2003, the Community Design Center at the University of Arkansas has won more than 100 awards for their design and research work, all for urban design, research, and education. His work at the Community Design Center specializes in interdisciplinary public works projects combining landscape, urban, and architectural design. And without any further ado, I'll pass it to Stephen.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to add on to that the Community Design Center is an outreach center of the Fay Jones School of Architecture. So we are a teaching office which has a professional staff of architects, urban designers, and landscape architects, and of course partner extensively with engineers and other design professionals in the course of our work. Students will work on about 40% of our projects. The other 60% are done through the staff and its partners. What I want to focus on today is our creative corridor, the Main Street revitalization, which is a 4-block revitalization of what is pretty much a neglected Main Street in downtown Little Rock. But the revitalization is based on bringing a new arts economy and a residential component to Main Street rather than its traditional retail base. That base has left downtown, and we don't think it's coming back. So this is really a kind of retooling of Main Street. And what I want to really focus on today is the design aspect. And working with the mayor as a client, which is important, which I'll talk about in a second, but also keeping in mind that streets are as much political projects as they are technical projects. And that's something that I'll focus on in the presentation. Yeah, and I think we have to talk about the context of the city for a minute. This is Little Rock, which is now a city of 200,000 with a 750,000 population in the metro area. But this is Little Rock in 1910 when the population was only 40,000. It had one of the most extensive streetcar networks for a city of its size, over 44 miles of rail for a streetcar. But you can see 10, 12-story buildings, mixed use, a vital street life. And it's just amazing when we think what a city of 40,000 could support in terms of urbanism. But that's not the city now. You see in the upper left-hand image the city as it was in 1918, which is a very coherent fabric. But look to the image on the right. The orange is parking lot. Little Rock right now has all the glamour of Houston. Surface parking accounts for the largest land use in downtown. So streets are really important in helping leaders to put the city back together. Streets are a platform for adding value. And the city is going to have to be put together district by district, which is the strategy right now in Little Rock. So if you look at the slide on the bottom left, you can see that the creative corridor is really trying to aggregate scattered cultural organizations that are throughout the metro area. So what the mayor has been working on for the last 8 years, Mayor Mark Stodola, is convincing the symphony, the ballet, a film school, dance studio, the repertoire theater is there, the art center is there in downtown, convincing these organizations to move back to downtown, particularly in this 4-block area of Main Street. And what's important about that is those organizations not only bring significant office and production facilities to Main Street, but amongst all of them, they host 600 students annually in their programs. These are students that are both in the Little Rock area and travel to Little Rock over the summer. So this is not only an arts economy, but it's also an education economy that's being brought back to these 4 blocks in downtown. And here's the schedule of the stakeholder participation. The mayor has been very good at working with federal agencies for technical assistance and support, from the Mayor's Institute to the EPA Greening America's Capital Grant. Our grant that we did with the city was funded by the NEA Our Town grant. And now in the development and construction of the first phase, the mayor has been able to get a $1 million EPA grant to install green infrastructure on Main Street. But you can see below all of the property owners, all of the partner organizations that have been a big part of these discussions for the last 8 years. And this is important in terms of the city's administrative infrastructure. While the mayor is elected, the mayor has no staff. The 200 city staff that are affiliated with Public Works, Design, and Planning report to the city manager. So the mayor has to borrow that staff in order to accomplish these kind of projects. So it really takes a mayor that's where this is a key project, a keystone project that can develop these projects. The city manager is not going to do it. So the City of Little Rock's administrative structure is set up to do these kind of projects. Here's Main Street over its evolution in the last 100 years, from a classic Main Street to its eventual decline as Little Rock really experienced in the 50s and 60s a flight from the city to the suburbs. If you remember that slide of the orange parking lot space downtown, 80% of Little Rock's population abandoned the city for the suburbs, and 65% of its building stock was torn down. And Main Street charts that decline. In 1980, they built a pedestrian mall. That's since been ripped out. The rub is the city's still paying off the bonds on that project. And you can see in 2012, when we were working on the project, what Main Street is today, which is essentially an abandoned street with beautification. And so we're suggesting a different type of project. What the Creative Corridor is suggesting is that the street and its townscape is really the platform for capturing value. It's not going to be with the buildings. There's only 4 vacated sites in which we have an opportunity to do new buildings. But really the street is what's going to allow the city, of course along with the renovation of the buildings, but the street itself can retool the urban spaces for bringing program and resources, investments, and people back to downtown. And so what we based our design on is are reclaiming the non-traffic social functions related to gathering, assembly, recreation, and aesthetics that traditional streets once brought to the city. It's really the street, as John was saying, that really is the basis for the urbanism and for placemaking. So placemaking is really key here. The one thing to keep in mind in terms of working with the mayor is that everything that I'm going to show you is against the code in Little Rock. All the low-impact development facilities and green infrastructure that we're putting into the street, the kind of road geometry that creates good places in terms of what streets have always done, is against the codes in Little Rock, mostly because the codes are based upon a suburban model of traffic modeling. So it was really important to work with the mayor to greenlight the kind of practices that we're showing you in this project. Here's a phasing strategy for the Creative Corridor. It's important that we calibrate public investment with private investments, so that the public investments don't get too far ahead of the private. That's usually why urban design projects often fail, is because the public and private is not in sync with one another in terms of investment. And so you can see here that that we've divided the creative corridor into 3 strategies of implementation. First, create gateways at the endpoints of the 4-block area to establish scope of work and turn that 4-block area into a series of rooms. The trick is to create places that are based upon nodes that encourage people hanging out while still allowing traffic to pass through. Again, it's really trying to reorient the street from a corridor to a series of nodes and urban rooms. Second is develop a center, and third is to connect the center with the edges through a kind of low-impact development urban stormwater infrastructure that I'll show you in a second. Here are those strategies with photos of the context as it is now. You know, really beginning with the gateways, and then really there's only 4 opportunities to introduce new buildings. The other thing to keep in mind is that Arkansas has a very strong property rights culture, and so developing historic codes which create alignment between new structures and old structures is simply unfeasible. So we knew we were going to get a level of unevenness in new investment. That is, the new buildings that will be built will likely be 20, 30, 40-story glass and steel buildings with modern technology. They'll be done by corporate entities. And so the street for us was the way to capture any kind of coherence between new and old, between small scale and large scale, and between the creative corridor and the rest of the city. So this is a drawing showing the aspects and the townscaping of the creative corridor, all the trees, all the paving, the street furniture, the frontages that we put into the city, really just focusing on developing that street. So I'll quickly take you through the gateway features, both ends. The gateways are really defined as shared spaces created by pedestrian tables, which forces the car to not only slow down, but it raises the car and the eventual light rail that will come to Main Street up at the level of the pedestrian. So the pedestrian doesn't step down into the space of the street. The pedestrian is privileged, which is what shared spaces do. So the creative corridor is based upon a shared street model that privileges pedestrian, it slows and calms traffic, and it forces the motorist to behave in a social way. Really looking at the amenities that you put into the street, nothing's taken for granted. We're looking at the coherence between frontage, landscape, what's underground, the paving. All of this is a low-impact development where we use landscape to ecologically manage urban stormwater runoff, lighting, signage. All of those things are thought about in terms of making the space of the street. There's the gateway at the south end. Lighting is very important. It's really critical because people are going to live here, and because we have a big education and arts component, that the street feels safe, that the perceptions of safety are resuscitated with our project, and that the street become a 24/7 environment, which is a reversal from the kind of perceptions that people have of downtown Little Rock currently. You see here slides. Construction is in process for phase 1 of the gateways. You see the gateway at the intersection, the top slide, our low-impact development facilities where the EPA has given us a grant to make sure that the green infrastructure, the landscape, what's happening under the street becomes a demonstration for project for how streets can become ecological assets rather than liabilities, using the street in terms of treating and managing stormwater runoff. These are bioswales as well as filtration, trenches, permeable pavement is throughout the entire pedestrian table, along with structural cells underground. We use silva cells to not only enhance the street's ability to manage the water and to filter, but also to create uncompacted soils so that we have a real nurturing environment for tree growth. As you know right now, the lifespan of an average urban tree is 13 years. And so we wanted to really develop an urban street infrastructure that grows and sustains healthy trees for their expected lifespans. The second part of this was developing a center. That will likely come last in the phasing of the project, which was different from how we thought about it. But you have to really go where the money takes you, and the money was about developing the first and third phases. But anyhow, in the center, this plaza that we developed, the crossroads between Capitol Avenue, which leads on access to the Capitol, and of course Main Street, which leads to the City Convention Center. This was an important intersection. And so we wanted to create a room at the intersection with marquees and lighting features and amphitheater that really develops a sense of place at what many see as the most symbolic crossroads in Arkansas, Capitol, Main, in downtown Little Rock. The idea is to work with the property owner to bring the energy of the street up into the building so that we have a strong interface between architecture, the space of the street, and of course the transportation, the important transportation systems that will be taking place in the street, including transit with the light rail and bus systems. You can see a ground shot of that where lighting is really important in creating a kinetic and vital environment, particularly at night. That blue oval that you see to the right, that would be a transit stop for both buses and trains, and of course creating a street environment that accommodates all modes of travel. So what we've tried to do in the street geometry is get rid of the mode separation between pedestrian, bikes, transit, and car, and really use the plaza as a model for creating this kind of shared space. Again, where motorists and pedestrians have to make social contact in order to negotiate one another. The third phase is thickening that western edge with an alley for ecological-based stormwater management. We're in the process of building that currently. That's will be one of the largest single low-impact facilities on a downtown street in our region. Again, the EPA is funding this. And basically, this landscape, which is all productive landscape, every bit of landscape that we plant, will be charged with urban stormwater management, including rain gardens, tree boxes, pervious paving, infiltration facilities, and of course, the entire 2 blocks is a functioning bioswale. That is integrating dining facilities. We have a boardwalk for both traffic movement, pedestrian traffic, and the restaurants that may come to Main Street and would like outdoor dining facilities. That's currently under construction. As you can see here, that's really part of the space of the street. This is important to think about what is the architecture underground is above ground. So again, the street is really designed to be a sponge that is managing stormwater runoff. And of course, this is all integrated with the street as a place, a street that hosts not just transportation movement and parking, but also hosts pedestrian movement. So this is a real effort to not only reclaim pedestrian culture in downtown Little Rock, but also change the codes so that we can facilitate this kind of placemaking. Again, that's not permitted on the books right now. And just in wrapping up, showing you a kind of synthesis of what that place can be, we often undervalue the street and its landscape as a city-making tool. And this is really looking at the street, as Kevin Lynch says, as a structure for providing legibility, providing the image of placemaking in tandem with the architecture. I know as urban designers, we tend to think about architecture, especially in architecture, we tend to think about the buildings first and the space in between the buildings as an epiphenomena of the buildings. But in this case, we're claiming that urban design and landscape architecture have a powerful structuring effect that's independent of buildings. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Steve, and I really like what you said there about thinking of the space between the buildings as a phenomenon of the buildings. I'm gonna pirate that from you someday. I don't know exactly when. Our third and final speaker is Bill Collins, who is the Vice President of Simone Collins Landscape Architecture in Norristown, Pennsylvania, and he serves as principal in charge of transportation, bridge, transit, greenway and trail, context-sensitive design, and corridor planning projects. Bill specializes in heritage and placemaking projects that feature cultural landscapes and historic structural rehabilitation of bridges, aqueducts, mills, canals, and railroads. Bill's designs have won over 22 federal, state, and regional awards and are recognized for innovations and smart syntheses of integrity, practicality, and creativity. And Bill's presentation today is going to cover his firm's experience in thoughtfully addressing the intersection points between trails and other transportation modes. And just one more thing before Bill starts, I'd like to remind the attendees to go ahead and start sending in your questions at any time using the question box. We have a lot of people online, and there could be a big glut if everybody waits until we start the Q&A. So please go ahead and send them in. If you've already thought of them, go ahead and type them in. Thank you very much. So Bill, on to you.
Thank you, Brian. Those were great presentations. And John, if you recognize this landscape, it's the sunset of the one that you showed, but this one's totally photoshopped. Okay, I'm going to present case overviews. I'm going to go through them quickly and basically speak about landscape services, the obstacles that were encountered, strategies to overcome them, and give you some data on each of these projects. They're all off the main PennDOT system. Some of them have worked with PennDOT, but in general, these are non-motorized type projects. And to start with, there's all these obstacles we all recognize, and I think the most ironic one is sometimes friends become obstacles to projects. These are the types of structural solutions that we're going to talk about and show you. And then this is a range of landscape architecture services. There were others, but this is the range that we used on the project, on all the projects. So we'll start with over projects. The Tohickon Aqueduct is a National Historic Landmark. It's an element of the Delaware Canal, National Historic Landmark, and it's in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. This project is to rehabilitate a historic transportation structure that carries the canal over the creek. The obstacles included friends. There were people, even in some of the agencies we were working with, who didn't think this was a good idea. The impetus was to create something that was more historic from the one that was built after World War II, a concrete trough. And so the idea was to go back and use modern timber, and so that led to a whole series of innovations, including modern timber in a traditional form, and also impermeable liners that would hold the water and protect the timber. This is the list of landscape services that were provided, and the landscape architect worked as a consultant to the community, and then the state conservation and natural resources did the engineering for the substructure, and the community provided the timber superstructure design. The budget was about $2.1 million, and the state wanted to cost out both the concrete version and this version came about $0.3 million over the concrete version, and the state said, we want this one. Another bridge over the Delaware Canal. These are called camelback bridges, and they're unique to this canal. The canal, they were built when there was only stone and wood and cast iron and wrought iron, and some of them have survived, or parts of them have been replaced. But this project was to create a new bridge over the canal, pedestrian bridge, in a location where there never was one. And so the idea was to use a modern steel structure, but to mimic the camelback design and justify a negative impact to the national landmark. So this is the traditional design, and this is the design that was created. You can see that there's stairway approaches. The LA did a number of things on this project, starting with the master planning and park planning, all the historic research necessary, and writing the grants and doing the simulations to show what it would look like in place. And then going through the alternatives analysis to determine if, in fact, ADA ramps were needed for this bridge, and if they were, they would be 4 times as long as the bridge itself. So in this case, the LA wrote the compliance justification to not have ramps because there were other access locations that were found and accessible. So here's some of the early documentation of the bridge, and it was a collaboration with the manufacturer's engineer to come up with all the design details. And the friends or that were opposed to this project in the beginning are now using the bridge, and everyone's happy. Kings Covered Bridge is in western Pennsylvania, and when we were asked to come on board with this project, they were fearing that it was going to fall in the creek at any day. So most of the obstacles were trying to get the money just to stabilize it, and then come up with another plan to fund it. So the LA put the team together for the stabilization and wrote the grant applications, 100% federal, to rehabilitate the covered bridge, and that included the approaches and the abutments. Here's a couple views before and after where the bridge was stabilized. It was just slung hanging in the air for about 6 years before the money could get in place and the design was ready to bid as a PennDOT project. There's the stats on it. You can see by the time period, some of these projects take 10 years because they really start from the grassroots, and this is a way that landscape architecture can get in at the planning stage of these transportation projects. This is a new bridge, not new anymore, but it never existed. The idea was to create a new pedestrian bridge that would become a central focus of town center redevelopment. There were a lot of NIMBYs for this project because it was going to recreate the streetscape. The traffic studies showed that they needed 4 lanes through this area, and a lot of it was heavy traffic for industrial farms. And so a traffic study was done, as well as an economic study, to determine if the roadway was reconfigured, what could survive there as businesses or mixed use, and the landscape architect did the planning for the town center and for the recreation for the town center, and the trail study, and all those converged to show the need for a pedestrian bridge over that 5-lane highway if anyone was expected to walk over it. So these were some early sketches that were done where the initial build out and then the full build out. The project was stalled out by the economic downturn, but has since come back, not exactly as designed, but the bridge was built first, and so the landscape architect was asked to do something that was context sensitive and a focal point, where the infrastructure created public place as well. You'll see this as we go on, but these are the services that the LA provided. And then going right into the architecture of the bridge, the LA did all this in collaboration with structural, civil, and geotechnical engineers. But the bridge architecture is something that the landscape architect did, and above is the fascia beams, which are structural, and the art is embedded in them, and the section below is a section longitudinally through the deck that shows the amenities on deck. So this is the project as completed. It really integrates the bridge into the landscape, both from above and below, the driver's perspective, the pedestrian's perspective, and it features the preferred material in bridge construction, concrete, as a sculptural and art material. Here's the stats. This one took 11 years from the conception by the township that they wanted to do a new town center to the ribbon cutting. So some under projects. This is the Pottstown pedestrian underpass, and the purpose was to create a thoroughfare under an active railroad between two parts of town, the riverside and the business side. Most of the obstacles were costs, but there were physical. It was in the floodplain, and basically it didn't become an active project until the community college on the riverside wanted to expand to the other side of the tracks, and they needed to get their students and teachers between the two facilities. So how could that be created as a safe pedestrian link and connect the two parts of town? The LA did the original plans that identified this as a pedestrian facility before the need was there, created the concepts, and then went right on through to take the project through design and compliance. This is a view. It's a Norfolk Southern line. All the design work had to be reviewed by Norfolk Southern as well as our SHPO because it was eligible for the National Register. The mill race predated the railroad. The railroad came in and built sections of mill race over it. About a $1 million rehabilitation. The landscape architect did all the site design and all the compliance work. Some through projects. This is called Minnesink Greenway Trail, and that's Route 80 that you can see. The idea was that when Route 80 came through in the 1950s, it cut off the historic village of Delaware Water Gap, which is kind of world famous, but by modern infrastructure that didn't allow for any pedestrian access from one side of Route 80 to the other. This happened in a couple places in town. This was one of them. Now people would probably not have walked there until the township built a park on one side, and PennDOT itself built a welcome center on the other side, and people were walking back and forth on the road, and so that, even though the plans were in place, that created the urgency to do some kind of facility, and this isn't the best facility, but it was an interim facility. So the LA wrote the strategy, did the negotiation with PennDOT, came up with the design with some context features, and it only took 11 years to get this in place for a 3-foot walkway. Now, this underpass is functionally obsolete, so at some point this whole thing is going to be improved, and the approaches on both sides acknowledge that. But until that time, this is the safe and accessible route that's available. including crossing the local railroad. The through trails. This is a project that just was awarded $170 million to retire it's a road diet, retire one lane of four, this quarter-mile section or half-mile section of Scenic River Road is the only four-lane section of a very bucolic road, and that's US 202 that crosses, and it was created in the 1950s. Other, modernized infrastructure, and so these four lanes serve to access the cloverleaf ramps between the two highways. But after traffic analysis, it was determined that one of the lanes wasn't needed, one of the northbound lanes, and so the LA did the planning and the grant application work and all the renderings to show how one lane could be retired, a bioswale that would treat the stormwater for a problem area, and a separated two-directional trail could be put in. Now this links to the Camelback Bridge that I showed you earlier, and is part of a circuit trail system of the greater Philadelphia area. So all those attributes raised it up in the ranking when it had to compete for funding. So there's the bridge that it connects to. It connects the Cross County 202 trail to the Delaware and Lehigh National Trail. This part of the project will probably go into construction next year. Another through project, the Big Savage Tunnel. It's part of the Great Allegheny Passage, which is the trail that's been under development by multiple partners to connect Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. through the C&O Trail. This Big Savage Tunnel goes through the peak of Big Savage Mountain. It was a one-lane Western Maryland Railroad facility that was retired and abandoned, and when the landscape architect did the master plan for the Somerset County part, between the time the master plan started and the time it ended, the tunnel was caving in. So the LA did the alternatives analysis to see if there could be some kind of bypass, switchback, some kind of system to get up over the mountain and back down from the north to the south side. That proved not feasible, and because this became the keystone of that entire trail system, the state, the federal government all kicked in and went on to rehabilitate that tunnel as per master plan. So here's the stats. It took a number of years, and it was a big project. The cost kept multiplying, but that was the commitment of the state to this project. I'm going to turn it back over now, and these are the contact information, so take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Bill. Christine, were there any admin items before we go right into the Q&A?
No, it looks like we're good, other than just a reminder that a PDF of the presentation will be on our webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and after the session is over. And this will be recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. And that's it.
I think also the attendees will get an email generated by the GoToWebinar system that has those links in it too, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, the first question that I have on my queue here is for Stephen. It's about the shared vehicle space, or the shared transportation space in the creative corridor, and whether there have been any safety concerns, and if so, how they were addressed, since you have, light rail, the automobiles, bicycles, and pedestrians all sharing the same space.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, so they've opened up the gateways, and keeping in mind that rail is probably 10 years away, there weren't really any safety concerns. The big political obstacles that we found in this project was more mundane concerns like parking. We were taking on-street parking away as the street develops over time and relocating it to the extensive parking facilities around. So whenever you're doing these projects, parking becomes, especially on-street parking, becomes a big issue. But the way we've handled it or managed that issue with the community is that we say that we'll phase out the on-street parking on Main Street, particularly as higher and better uses of the land are found as investment comes in. Just the announcement of this plan in the first year brought in $80 million in investment, including office space, boutique hotels, condominiums. And so there really isn't much of a concern about safety. It's mostly parking. The second big issue was street trees. We had to tear out trees lining the street that were really in their last years, and that caused a lot of consternation. And by replanting trees of a larger caliber, and having done that now, we were able to bridge those concerns. But the issue of the shared space really hasn't been there yet.
Okay, thanks. The second question that I have here is for John, asking about whether there was a court decision a few years ago stating that abandoned rail lines reverted to the underlying property owner and were no longer going to be available for public use as trails. Do you know anything about that? John, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Hi, yes. Hi, yeah, this is John. Yeah, I do recall that being discussed, and I'm in time. Hello?
Yeah, I'm not hearing him either.
John, are you there?
Hi, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. Sorry about the technical glitch, folks. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a court decision, I guess in March of 2014. And I think, let's see, I'm not sure if, no, unfortunately, I do not have the logistics of where it stands now. I think its existing rail trail projects will not be affected. I think it's potentially ones moving forward that you'd have to coordinate with the private landowner or whatever the trail manager with the land adjacent to the railroad corridor.
Okay, thanks. Be something worth looking into. But I'm going to move on to the next question then, which was more, I think, for all of the panelists. And the question was, for contractual purposes, where does the scope of the landscape architecture stop and the scope of the engineer begin? Where is the dividing line in responsibility in those projects. And whoever feels like jumping in first, feel free.
I'll take a shot. This is Bill. Well, you can see we're working on infrastructure design, and so for the most of the projects that you saw, the landscape architect was either lead to the community, and it was outside of what I'll call a system project, a PennDOT project. It wasn't through their procurement system, although our firm and many firms are registered PennDOT partners, and we compete, but generally for those projects that come through the PennDOT system, they require an engineer as lead. Now, when there are enhancements type projects, a landscape architect can be lead, or at least they could be, because we served as lead for the Kings Bridge rehabilitation project, and we hired the engineer and we managed the project. So it just depends on the project. For the Sohegan Aqueduct, we served as the lead for the community association and delivered the superstructure design with our own engineer that we hired, and then the state used their engineers to do the substructure, and then we coordinated work. So it works a number of different ways.
Anybody else have something
this
to add to that?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that, Brian. Yeah, you know, we found in working with the city of Little Rock and with other communities that whether you're an architect or landscape architect or engineer, it doesn't really matter to them. What they're looking for is a suite of design services, and which includes perhaps community relations and holding design workshops. And it's really not they don't seem to have much concern from which discipline the lead comes from. And so what we found is that it's really up to the respective design professionals to establish what's in their wheelhouse, what kind of services they're capable of delivering. It's not the kind of state mandates that Bill was just talking about. So at least in the context in which we operate, there's incredible freedom as long as you can show capability. So a landscape architect could do the entire job along with, in this case, a civil engineer.
Hey, yeah, this is John. Echoing kind of what Stephen and Bill were saying, I think there is kind of a lot of overlap, and I hope we kind of showed that today. And I think that's pretty telling. These are kind of innovative treatments, if you will, and I think there is expected to be a little horizontal kind of overlap between some of these disciplines, not necessarily so black and white.
Can I give one other example, Brian? The 40-foot bridge pedestrian facility that we designed, that came out of a landscape architecture plan, and the idea that there was going to be a crossing there, was going to be a surface crossing. Originally, the landscape architects said it didn't work, and then the landscape architects did the alternatives analyses to show where a bridge could go and how the grading would work, and that took depressing the state highway. That initiative came from the landscape architect and was embraced by the municipality, and the landscape architect served the municipality directly. The municipality also hired the engineering team, and they served the municipality directly. In this case, it was on a PennDOT state highway, but the municipality did all the upfront engineering acquisition, and then PennDOT built the project that we delivered to them. And so it was a turnkey project, and the township took it back over as owner. But the landscape architect can go deep into structural designs if they're versed in that. And to give you an example, on the 40-foot bridge, the facade with the arch and the ripples, that's a structural beam. That's not an applied motif. That art is directly in the beam, and so when we asked the engineer, could you do that, he took a look at it and said yes, and then together we figured out how to do that. So there's a real opportunity for collaboration at the structural level.
Thanks. The next question I have here is really an amalgam of two that were about the creative corridor in Little Rock. Steve, the questions that came in are, one, has the city been successful in relocating arts facilities to that corridor, and also what efforts have been made to encourage pedestrian use at street level in the corridor?
Yeah, of course, we're in phase one, so everything is under construction. It's basically a large construction site now, but basically the city has been successful getting the office and admin and the educational facilities of the symphony and the ballet downtown. They are also providing new space for the Rep, which is also, it's a nationally recognized repertory theater. So all three of those have new spaces. There's spaces for about 30 new artist studios, and a culinary institute has just announced that it is going to build its downtown facilities on Main Street. So it's been great at attracting the arts back to downtown. As an ancillary project, the city is also refurbishing its symphony facilities for the symphony, which is I think a $65 million project. So this Main Street project is in tandem with a larger arts-focused revitalization in Little Rock. As far as pedestrian, time will tell, because again, everything's under construction, as both the street is coming online and new condominiums come online, as well as a new boutique hotel as well.
Okay, the next question is actually another one that's for the whole panel, and that's about whether before and after cost-benefit analyses are done on these projects where landscape architecture has been an integral component. And the question here is asking about the economic benefit of these projects, and maybe convincing the public and elected officials of the benefit of integrating landscape architecture based on the economic benefit that could be realized. So again, whoever feels like jumping in first is welcome.
Well, on the creative corridor, the mayor had a lot of naysayers. I mean, a lot of people, keeping in mind that Little Rock is still a fairly anti-urban place. Most people live in the suburbs. And so the project was seen as not only radical, but kind of a flight of fancy. And so there's no support for the mayor. He was out on his own until we made the plan. And the plan showing what the place could be started to arouse a lot of interest, and particularly the landscape architecture component of the street and the EPA's investment in it. The landscape brought the EPA investment. That has really taken off, and that's part of what's brought the $80 million in phase one investment. That's the pioneer investment, with a lot more to follow. But it's also turned things around politically for the mayor. Now that mayor is seen as a national figure in urban revitalization, and that's actually come back around at home here. There's been a lot of praises sung about the creative corridor. And so the placemaking aspect of it, rather than the traffic component, was really what captured people's imagination.
Bill, John?
I can take I can take a shot at that. Yeah, Bill. I'm going to use the 40-foot bridge as an example, and that's the centerpiece of a big, that's the zenith of a big planning project. And so when the Turnpike announced that it was going to expand its interchange from 4 booths to 10, and PennDOT had no plans to accept the traffic on its adjacent state highways, the township went ahead and hired its own engineers and its own economic specialists to start studying the project. And so it was an integrated study from the beginning. What could that regional market bear if the roadway infrastructure was upgraded, and then how would the roadway be integrated with the parcels that were remaining when the new network was built. The township went so far as to look at how these small properties that were once a historic village but were blown out by the Turnpike and just remnants remaining, how could they be consolidated and then bought and assembled into modern development parcels. So the township hired the landscape architect to do an overlay zoning plan where developers could come in and assemble parcels and get benefits from that. So yeah, all through this rational planning process, there were people saying, no, this is a bad idea. But the project survived, I think, 4 different boards of supervisors. So, and then it got to the point where it was going to happen because it was a smart idea. Now they called the bridge to nowhere because that part of the infrastructure went in before it was really needed. But it became the symbol for people against it and the people for it. Now the hotel and the condominiums that were built right next to the bridge are called Bridgeview. So that became essential to the marketing. So I think you have to transcend the naysayers, and you have to stick with it if you've got a good idea and back it up with your studies.
John, anything to throw in from your end?
Sure. I'll just add, I think it's getting back to some of the data that's coming out now, how we are driving less as a culture and community. So we want different options to get certain places. So I think complete streets makes sense from a fiscal standpoint to start planning and designing for all these different modes and landscape treatment, stormwater, vegetation, as opposed to having to do costly retrofits down the road.
Okay, we are almost out of time for our Q&A, and we have but one question left in the queue, and that's going back to Little Rock again. Stephen, there was a question about whether the stormwater solution that you mentioned with the thickened edge on the edge of the roadway was in response to a specific stormwater or drainage issue in the area, or that was just a general code.
No, it's more of a general policy. Both the city wants to be involved in building low-impact development facilities, that is ecologically based stormwater management within the city. They want that to become part of the way the city thinks about water. But basically it goes back to the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission, who we've done projects with, especially in their 319 program. Basically what Arkansas has done with our partnership is move monies in low-impact development and non-point source pollution from essentially an agricultural context to an urban one. And so Arkansas is trying to figure out how to do these kind of low-impact development facilities within urban areas. And so, and also ANRC's offices is right on Main Street. So they see this every day. So this is an important project for their program statewide, and this becomes an important demonstration project to them. The one thing that we tried to push was really increasing Main Street's capacity to manage urban stormwater runoff. Everyone kind of backed off on that and really said that this project is more a demonstration project than a project that will manage most of the stormwater. So we're hoping that that once we can monitor this, the performance in the next couple of years, we'll have the feedback that will allow us to do even more significant projects within the state's urban areas. But for now, this is an important demonstration project which is going to change minds and policy about what streets can be.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. We are pretty much out of time. Our hard end time is 2:30 Eastern. And so I'll just take a second to thank all three of our panelists for three very informative presentations, and thank all of our audience for joining in today and participating. And Christine, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Nope, that's it. Thanks to you, Brian, too, for facilitating today. You did a great job. Thank you very much. And everyone, we'll see you next week.